Now, the Auditor-General says municipalities are not getting better at managing their finances. Briefing a short joint sitting in Parliament yesterday, the Auditor-General, Tsakani Maluleke, said only 30% of the audited municipalities received an unqualified audit in the 2020 financial year. In her report, Maluleke said an Eastern Cape municipality bought its mayor a car using COVID-19 funds that were meant for the emergency procurement of water as well as sanitation services. And in some cases, other municipalities procured PPE but stored it in such poor conditions that it could not be used. For more on this, I'm joined by Kevin Allen, who is Managing Director at Municipal IQ. Good to have you with us this afternoon, Mr. Allen. Now, when we look and we hear reports such as this, I wonder, and if you could take us through the type of infrastructure in municipalities that allows this type of corruption to perpetuate.
Hi, Tammy. So great to be with you. Yeah, it's the Auditor-General report. It always comes out about this time every year, and the results and the Auditor-General's synopsis is just predictably depressing. I mean, it's the same every year. And this year again, yet again, we have just the same bad news. Very few municipalities were able to get a clean audit with no outstanding issues, really 10% of municipalities. And that may shock you, but it's like that every year. And auditing, everybody has to account for the money that they spend in the public sector. It's critically important, so that in the public we can say, okay, we can see transparently what the money was spent on. And we're not getting that from local government. And as you allude to, the critical issue is really what kind of framework is it that municipalities operate in? What are the controls in place? And why do we see such terrible failure in this regard? And really, it's no surprise that really that framework is very poor, that the audit outcomes are very poor because of the skill and the capacity within municipalities to carry out this very important process.
As you said, Mr. Allen, we find ourselves at this very point year after year. What needs to change in order for the results that we are getting to change?
Well, it really is the nub of the issue. What has to happen here to improve the situation? Because we can't just carry on like this. If I can just have another second just to illustrate this point as well. One of the things that exasperated the Auditor-General is when she was presenting to Parliament, she was saying that not only are we paying people in municipalities to carry out the audit function, but it's very clear to her that in many municipalities, these people don't have the skill to do it. So they in turn pay yet again, a second time, for this to be done by consultants. And the consultants don't manage to do it because they come in at the 11th hour to do the audit process. And you can't do it like that. You've got to do it every day over the course of the financial cycle. So we're paying twice and still getting nothing in many, many municipalities. And it's crazy. I mean, if you listen to the Auditor-General, she expresses exasperation, rightly so, with this. And so should we as members of the public. And really, it's been going on too long. Now, ultimately, if you say, well, how do we change things? The question is, who do we hold accountable for this? Who is to blame for failure in auditing and in other issues at a municipality? Now, clearly, you have municipal councillors, you have a mayor, and then you have senior administrators. You have a chief financial officer who's in charge of this process. Why does nothing happen to any of these people? Why does nobody hold them accountable? Because ultimately that is what's happening here. And you have two processes that are in place, two parts of the framework at a greater level. The one is at a provincial level. Our provincial MECs for local government really also have to take up their role here in a much more serious fashion and hold municipalities within their province accountable for what is happening. And then at a national level as well, national government really has to take a more active role in this as well. We cannot have a situation where we have 24 billion or more in irregular expenditure and nothing happens. The Auditor-General is doing her part. She's pointing it out. She is taking action where she can in terms of the new Audit Act to engage in processes to remedy the situation. But really, provincial and national government have to take a more active role to hold councillors and senior managers accountable for what's happening here.
What are the structures that are in place that allow situations like this to continue? And these are the ones that I'm highlighting now. The fact that business was given specifically to friends of those who are working within the municipality, the friends of municipal officials, and in some instances it was found that business was actually given directly to the government officials themselves. How does one circumvent that type of occurrence?
Yeah, so let's also add one where the Auditor-General said that the COVID money that was there for spending on COVID in one municipality in the Eastern Cape, she didn't say which one, the municipality took that money and bought the mayor a car with it. I mean, it's outrageous, you know, let's just say. And, you know, there's two issues. The first is in terms of irregular spending, some of the money has not been criminally acquired by a third party. It's not part of some criminal conspiracy. Some of the money is just not properly audited. It's not properly accounted for. So you can have money, and that again is due to the lack of skills and the lack of experience in the auditing process in municipalities. Now that's also not an excuse. That's not an excuse anymore, because you can't have the wrong people in a job. This is a highly specialized job. We need the right people in the job. It's not because the positions are sitting vacant. It's because the wrong people are in this job. We need proper accountants and proper financial specialists with a lot of experience doing this. And so it's very clear the wrong people are being hired to do this job. And you know, apart from that, there is some money which is being extracted through criminal malfeasance, and you know, that's another reason why it's important that there is follow-up on this process by provincial government in the first instance, but then oversight by national governments as well. And that's firstly to try and get some of the money back, which has not been accounted for and which has maybe been stolen. So we need to understand that. And it's difficult because sometimes accounting and auditing is so poor in municipalities, it's very difficult to trace this money. And the Auditor-General commented on that as well. But there is legislation in place. You know, the Audit Act is one piece of legislation, but also in terms of the MFMA, the Municipal Finance Management Act, you know, there's plenty of regulations in terms of that legislation that people should be following that they aren't following. So the structure and the framework within which people should be working here, if they're properly qualified and experienced in this area, that is actually there for the most part. You know, National Treasury has spent many years putting that regulation and legislation above that in place. But really, again, the issue, the frustrating issue, is that those who are not doing their job are not taken to task. We cannot just continue with the situation where auditing, I mean, it just doesn't seem that auditing is taken seriously at very many municipalities.
I wonder, Mr. Allen, these are pre-existing situations that we're talking about and pre-existing challenges. But what role did the proclamation of the national disaster actually help in exacerbating the lack of regulation and adherence to structure that we see?
Well, certainly, I think that did exacerbate the situation, because as we saw at provincial and indeed at national government level, that the procurement process, there was some leeway in terms of that, where I think we would accept that because of the nature of the COVID crisis and the necessity to get PPE down to people on the ground very quickly, whether it be at municipal level or at provincial level, provincial health, etc., or national level, I think there was a lot more pragmatism in that regard. But the problem there is that it wasn't only pragmatism. I mean, when you have a situation where it's acceptable, where you don't have as many controls, but you have the correct outcome. In other words, the PPE is bought and it's given to people on the ground who need it. You're paying a reasonable price for it, and it's used in the correct. It's allocated in the correct way. But that's not what has happened, and it's the same with provincial and national government. You've had a lot of opportunists who have come in, either from outside municipalities or within municipalities, and they've taken advantage of the situation, and that's when you've had money either being spent on really what anybody would see to be the wrong things, for instance, buying a motor vehicle, or being given to a supplier who's not qualified in terms of procurement criteria, etc. And that's the problem here, as in other spheres of government.
As we wrap up this afternoon, what role does the citizen play in all of this? I mean, we are still seeing a lot of service delivery protests because the money is simply not going to the places where it's supposed to go, and communities are rebelling against that. But what can citizens do?
Well, the key thing that citizens can do is vote. That's a very important thing, and we at Municipal IQ are urging people to vote, because if you're not happy with your local councillor, and if you're not happy with the way your municipality is being run, then maybe you should be voting for someone else. And I'm not taking a dig at any one political party here, because I think across the board, there are political parties in all provinces. Some provinces do very much better in auditing than others. The Western Cape does better generally across the board, and their performance is better. But there are problems at a political party level across the board. So it's not only one political party, but really, if you haven't got what you think you deserve as a ratepayer or as a resident of a municipality, I think you should be thinking about how you're going to vote in the next local election, which is coming up towards the end of this year. And I really think if your councillor has not done well, if you haven't seen your councillor, if you think your councillor has not done a good job, then I think you should be voting for somebody else. And generally, unfortunately, we also see a lot of service delivery protests, which are really very much related to the lack of action around failure in service delivery, but also a few steps removed at things like auditing, and why the problem that audits are a problem is because they're often trying to hide incompetence or malfeasance. So protests are another way that people are objecting to this, unfortunately, many times violently, and that is unfortunate. But there is a direct link between failure in local government and protests or failure to deliver.
Certainly. Mr. Kevin Allen, thank you very much for breaking this down for us this afternoon, as we focus on the 26 billion rand in irregular expenditure at municipalities, according to the Auditor-General. That's Mr. Kevin Allen there. He's Managing Director at Municipalities IQ.